Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Winsight Live. Before I kick it over to Phil Lempert, a couple stories that we've got fresh up on Winsight Grocery Business this morning. The Save Mart chain in Modesto, California has announced they are the first grocery retailer in the US to partner with Starship, which are these little six-wheeled robots that can carry about 4 bags of groceries or over to people's homes autonomously over a 4 mile 4 mile round trip. I think they said they could take. Interesting stuff from Save Mart. Also yesterday, we told you that UNFI's CEO, Steve Spinner, said he would retire at the end of the next fiscal year. Steve joined this company 12 years ago when it had about $3 billion in revenue, is departing with them just having reported $26.5 billion in revenues. Did a lot of interesting things to transform UNFI from a specialty natural products distributor that mostly focused on center store items to a fresh deli supplier, and of course the acquirer of Super Value and doing conventional and natural food products. This came as they also announced their fourth quarter financial results, which looked pretty good. They beat the earnings expectations handily. They said sales were up by 8% overall. The market this morning, however, is killing them, and it's curious. I think there's some unpacking to do with regard to sort of how they're reporting their numbers, including some questions about their retail holdings, which they tried very desperately to sell before COVID, could not do, and wound up with 21% comps in the last quarter. So interesting stuff from UNFI, and we'll hear more from them shortly. Bill?
So John, we haven't talked about this, but back to your first story about Save Mart. So here in Santa Monica, next to a Starbucks was a little tiny store that was empty. What's happened is a startup has moved in there. I think there's like room for 4 desks. And what they have is they have one of these little robotic things. Theirs is ugly as anything. It's just a metal box on wheels with the cameras all over the place just to deliver snacks. And they've been doing it for probably about 2 or 3 weeks. I would say it's maybe 2 foot long by 1 foot wide, not very big, couldn't hold a full sack of groceries. But you see this thing going up and down Main Street and delivering things to hairdressers, people who are having their nails done and stuff like that. It is a hoot. And you see everybody, taking little videos of it on their iPhones as well, because they've never seen anything like this. So good for Save Mart. And I think Steve's a good guy. No matter what happens at UNFI, he's really done a fabulous job of transitioning that company, as you pointed out, to just a natural food supplier, a major supplier, obviously, to Whole Foods, to really, building it up in a terrific way. So we wish him all the best. A couple of quick news stories. The Times Union newspaper has a reporter that's out there that is asking for people to make recommendations for genuinely decent, ready-to-eat food that happens to come from a mini mart or a convenience store. So it'll be interesting to see. And what they're going to do is they ask people to post a video of their tasting experiences. In a few weeks, it'll be up. When they have it up, we'll get Brett's take on it. Also, MenuFi, and I don't know, a question to all of you. Have any of you ever used cryptocurrencies?
No.
Yeah, I haven't either. So MenuFi, which is a menu app, now is adding 6 additional cryptocurrencies for digital food orders. And that's the first I've heard of it. And I'm just wondering whether or not anybody's heard of Instacart or Shipt or any grocery delivery service doing the same thing.
Not at this time, but anything's possible today, it seems like.
I guess I don't know of one person, we were talking about this earlier in our editorial meeting, I don't know of one person who's used cryptocurrency. It just sort of, I thought, died, but obviously, maybe now in the whole touchless, cashless world that we're talking to, and every day I'm getting a new credit card, which is a touchless credit card. So, my old credit cards I've got to shred, but you can't shred them because they have the metal chip in them. So you've got to return them to the company, but now you've got the touchless ones and so on. We are overcomplicating this. We just need to get back to cash, I think. So Kat,
Phil, the payment and options are expanding so quickly now. Amazon One was announced this morning. That is payment with your palm. Amazing. It'll coming to two of its Go stores.
yeah. So John, is it time that we're all going to get that chip embedded in our hand, and that's the way we're going to check out, so we don't have to carry 15 credit cards and stuff?
It'll all be our eyes will be lasers.
Or our eyes. You're right.
Just
You're
all
right.
be our eyes.
So Kat, talk to us about the power of meat and how the pandemic has changed meat purchasing.
Yeah, so the power of meat is traditionally a once a year survey put out by FMI and the Foundation for Meat and Poultry Research and Education. But this year, due to COVID, they decided to do a mid-year power of meat study just to see how it has affected. We've all seen the numbers for meat skyrocket. And so they wanted to take a look to see what this all meant. And what they found was that 3/4 of consumers have changed their meat purchasing behavior during this first 6 months of the pandemic. And that meant that meat sales increased an unprecedented 34.6% since March. And half of consumers said they were trying different brands and cuts and types of meat. And some of this behavior was obviously spurred along by the out of stocks that we experienced when some of the processing plants shut down, and also just by the sheer pandemic or the sheer buying that went on at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were just buying anything that they could. Shoppers are changing. So they said 46% of shoppers changed cuts to save money, because we also did see some meat price inflation going on at the beginning of the pandemic. But they 44% said also that they were seeing fewer promotions, which kind of is not surprising, especially when the meat supply was so low. I think it was like April, May that really was kind of taking place. But again, they also showed that they're cooking more, so that also is spurring them to purchase more meat and making it back into the center of plate. So they said 76% of meals now included meat, which is good for the meat departments in grocery stores.
Yeah, but my question is still going to be, we're looking at the meat processing facilities. They've, as you pointed out, they've cut down the number of assortment that they're offering grocery stores, but there's still, 30-40% capacity. So prices, at least in my opinion, are still going to go up, especially as we go into the holiday season. I think, and if we go into, COVID-19 part 2, which looks like it's happening, and the recession and everything that's going on. So Kat, how are independent grocers dealing with this? And not only meat, but are we seeing any innovation there at all?
Yeah, so NGA recently held its executive conference, obviously virtually, an event that usually takes place in person in the fall. And so they were really focused on how independents, can get through this. And one of their presenters was Tom Blishock from Dialogic Group. And he was really saying, now is the time to innovate. He said that Q4 is probably going to be a little bit shaky when it comes to supply. The supply chain is still recovering. So now is the time for independents to really look at SKU rationalization, making sure that they have on the shelves exactly what it is that their customer wants. And because indies are so close to their customers, they should be able to do this, and really kind of hone in on what they want. Independents traditionally are pretty good at SKU rationalization because they don't have the footprint of the larger guys in their store. So they've been pretty good about this, but now is the time to really start looking at doing that and really start kind of re-energizing innovation and putting themselves ahead of the game when it comes to, consumers going back into the store and, making sure that they have that shopping experience that they're looking for independent grocers.
So talking about large guys, large stores, John, what's going on at Costco?
At Costco, they reported their fourth quarter late last week. They're sort of in a short way. They kind of got their groove back in a lot of ways. We've talked here before about how Kroger was kind of compromised more than most at the beginning of the pandemic. A victim of their own success in a lot of ways because their stores were already crowded and more people coming in said, it's too crowded there, as Yogi Berra says, they're too crowded, no one goes there anymore. There was that. There was pointed out last week also that, they are less developed in the areas of, click and collect. That's also related to, in some cases, to sort of preserving the experience that they have there for their shoppers. They kind of pulled their together more so in the last couple of months. Traffic's returning again. They've got their departments that were kind of really waylaid at the very beginning, like vision and some of the electronics and some of those things are selling again. But the star of the show, as always at Costco, is the fresh food, which is doing terrific. So that's what's going on at Costco.
And what about Kroger? We have some new news about their latest distribution center in Ocado.
Yeah, and related to that, I should have mentioned it as we opened this morning. Kroger noted that they named Gabriel Arriaga, as their new SVP of supply chain. He comes from Mondelez. This continues a trend among Kroger to hire outside executives with international experience, what they've been doing really since the 8451 Don Hunby days.
Yep.
Can you hear the dog barking outside?
We can. And he's basically saying, John, sit up, speak up. Come on, John, get your act together.
So that's heading their supply chain organization. And yesterday, Kroger Supply Chain announced the specific address of the 7th so far Ocado distribution center that's going to support their robotic e-commerce fulfillment facilities. This one in Romulus, Michigan is 135,000 square feet. That's less than half the size and almost a third of the size of some of the other ones that they're building, which are generally 350,000 or 375,000 square feet. The difference here is it's going to be faster from groundbreaking to opening. They say 18 months versus 24 months at some of the others. And will support about 250 jobs versus 400 in the larger centers. So Kroger's under a little bit of pressure, I think, to kind of demonstrate that Ocado is more than just a next day delivery thing and can be flexible and everything else. Interestingly enough, this facility is being built alongside an existing Kroger distribution center. And just this morning, with some help from our friends at Planned Grocery, we were looking over those centers. It turns out that the one in Georgia that they're building, a big one, is also adjacent to a Kroger, traditional distribution center. And you can imagine that that proximity is going to help them, stock those things up faster and et cetera. So a lot of activity going on with Kroger in the supply chain.
Absolutely. So I don't know about you guys, but every time I turn on TV these days, there's somebody, at least one person, who has a new book out. There's book after book after book. Obviously, most of it is about politics. But Jen, you've gotten a new book, which has nothing to do with politics. Well, maybe it does a little bit. Politics of the grocery business. Tell us a little bit about that.
So John Mackey just recently published a new book. It's his second book, I believe, and it's Conscious Leadership. Really interesting, a lot of thought-provoking ideas in there. And one of them that's kind of woven throughout the book is this idea of leading with love. And a couple of years ago, I heard him speak at a conference, and he said, we need more love in the world. And I thought, well, what a simple yet profound idea. And if we could only bring that to all of our businesses and to our communities and the world, that it would be a better place. And so he talks about that and gives some specifics. And then they also, he invited us to interview him via email, which I did, and asked him about, the Amazon relationship, because in the book, he describes it very favorably. And it's kind of like, this guy who started a business in 1978 based on, natural organic food and lifestyle. And, Amazon doesn't, really have that same kind of
with those values,
hippie vibe. And so I asked him, well, so it seems like you view that as a very positive relationship. And he described it as a happy marriage. And he listed a number of things that, that have come out of that, like a higher minimum wage for team members, better grocery delivery for their customers. And so, and it's allowed also Whole Foods to continue to build new stores. They've opened 10 stores in this year. They've got over 500 stores in the country. And so I asked specifically about the Woodland Hills Amazon Fresh location, because it's right near a Whole Foods market, and it's about healthy competition in the book, but that, that seems a little close. But he feels like, they're sort of offering different things, and Amazon Fresh is able to, to offer really competitive pricing and more national brands and all of that. So it was an interesting email and the email interview. And then we also talked about bringing love to business. And he said, it's something that you can practice every day. And they do it at Whole Foods by just showing appreciation is one small step. Showing appreciation when someone does good work is one way to kind of move the needle on love in business.
So should we all go out and buy the book?
I thought it was a good read.
Okay. I'll take that recommendation. Now, before we get to Pat, a couple comments that we have on Facebook from Dave Foreman: no cryptocurrency use here. And John Pandol, hopefully, John, I'm pronouncing your last name right. My daughter had to use cryptocurrency to buy her fake ID at college. So, John, I'm worried. Okay, Pat, what's up? Pat, in the food service business, obviously we've had a lot of restaurants that have either closed. I think we talked a couple weeks ago, NRA is suggesting that 100,000 restaurants are now closed permanently. But there are some chefs that are out there that are doing some interesting things. Tell us about that.
So it seems like every couple of weeks we do another depressing, story about how many restaurants are closing, the independents. And a chef at one of the independents in Portland, Oregon, it's called Le Bistro Montage. It closed after 27 years, and he didn't want it to be another casualty of the pandemic. So he asked the owner if he could use the name and transition it into a food truck. And so he was given permission, and it cost about $70,000 to outfit this food truck. Actually, he had to, he took some of the best sellers from the menu that he's selling there. And Cisco, who was his supplier, actually helped him set up the food truck and pare down the menu so that it focused on the things that would sell the best and that would be, easy enough to operate out of a food truck, because it is kind of smaller than a restaurant. But he's been in business since August, and he's doing really well. He said most of the business is walk-up business.
Sure.
He also does some third-party delivery, and he wants to start curbside pickup, which he can do through an app as well, where people will drive up to the lot. So in Portland, Oregon, they have these food cart parks that are on like big parking lots.
Yep.
And so people can actually drive up and they can deliver the food to the car. So it seems like a good transition. He doesn't have a lot of overhead or labor costs. He's doing things like jambalaya and Cajun mac and cheese and po' boys. It was it was like a Creole restaurant. So that's kind of the
Yeah,
sensibility.
I like the idea of Cajun mac and cheese. I mean, what I do is when I make mac and cheese, I add hot pepper flakes to it. But I
Mhm.
think incorporating it better with a Cajun sauce is probably smarter idea.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you.
has different toppings and sounds
Yeah.
like fun.
So Jen, that was some good news, but you've got more good news for us.
I do. So many grocers have been doing a great job of raising money and providing food to local food banks that are just really getting crushed by the rise in demand due to the pandemic. And Natural Grocers, a Colorado-based grocer,
As you say that with pride.
I do.
Yeah.
They recently broke their own fundraising record last month. They raised over $260,000 for local food banks. So that was a new record for
Great.
them, and I'm sure greatly appreciated by the communities they serve.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us today on Winsight Live. Again, our archives are available on Winsight Grocery Business, on Restaurant Business, on CSP, and on supermarketguru.com Facebook pages. I hope you'll check them out. And we'll be back here on Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, and we're going to have some great stories for you. And John, I want to know if your daughter really got that fake ID or if you're just pulling our leg. We'll see you on Thursday.